Saludos, bienvenidos a una edición más de tu podcast El Minuto Financiero. Tenemos una edición bien especial y bien importante e interesante. Vamos a dialogar en torno a la Ley PROMESA que fue habilitada en junio del 2016. La Junta Fiscal se convirtió en el ente a cargo de manejar las finanzas públicas de Puerto Rico, a la misma vez que se enfocó en reestructurar la gigantesca deuda pública que tenía Puerto Rico en ese momento de 70,000 millones de dólares, marcando un nuevo capítulo en la historia económica y política del país. Simultáneamente, la Junta comenzó un proceso de reformas estructurales y reformas importantes para sacar a Puerto Rico del estancamiento fiscal y económico y habilitar una nueva ruta alejada de toda la crisis que el país vivió en esos años. Hoy tengo el privilegio de entrevistar a uno de los protagonistas que desde el primer momento se convirtió no solamente en miembro de ese organismo, de la Junta de Supervisión Fiscal, sino que se convirtió también en el presidente de este organismo que todavía prevalece en el día de hoy. Así que estamos cumpliendo 10 años de la Ley PROMESA y todo lo que es el proceso que lidera la Junta de Supervisión Fiscal. Y está aquí porque ha publicado un libro en torno a este proceso histórico que el país ha vivido. Yo pienso a veces que no hemos entendido la magnitud de lo que hemos vivido y por eso decidí tenerlo en Puerto Rico, porque ha publicado un libro titulado Promised Land, The Inside Story of the Puerto Rico Debt Crisis, por David Skeel. David, welcome to Puerto Rico.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. It's
nice
wonderful
to
to be back
here and talk and let's talk about your book that is really important, taking into consideration the fact that Puerto Rico is 10 years after PROMESA was enacted by Congress. And this book tells a lot about what had happened over these 10 years. So before we go into the details and the insights for your book, let's talk about you. Who's David Skeel? What is your background? And who's David Skeel?
Who is David Skeel? David Skeel is a law professor who's been a law professor for many years, for 36 years now, who never expected to get pulled into public service, but 10 years ago I did get pulled into public service. I never had an idea or a desire to serve in government or to do another form of public service. But when I was invited to be considered to be on the oversight board in 2016, 10 years ago, my reaction was, this is what my expertise is, this is a possibility, maybe to do something practical. So I think of myself as a law professor who never expected to get pulled into public service, but did get pulled into public service.
You were surprised when Senator Mitch McConnell called you to be considered as a board member?
I was surprised. I didn't have any connection to Mitch McConnell at all. I was hopeful that I might be considered for the board because I'd been following the crisis in Puerto Rico, but I had no reason to believe that he or anybody else was going to call him. So it was a very big surprise when that call came.
Back then, do you know anything about Puerto Rico? Our political story, our economic problems, anything about the island?
Well, if you asked me the question before 2014, did I know anything about Puerto Rico? I would have been embarrassed because I would have to say probably the only thing I knew about Puerto Rico was West Side Story. Not too much beyond that. But as of 2014, when the whole country realized that Puerto Rico was in financial trouble, there were particular concerns about PREPA and PRASA. At that point, I started following the crisis. And from 2014 on, I did know a little bit about what was going on.
Okay, so what was the motivation to join the board back in 2016, right?
2016 is correct.
What was what made you decide to join the board and get involved in this process?
What made it easy to decide, what caused me to decide, was I really, in what then was about 25 or 26 years as a law professor, I had been writing about bankruptcy and financial distress. I had been teaching about it. I had been talking about it. But I had never done anything practical with respect to bankruptcy. And this crisis seemed like an opportunity to put my expertise to practical use. That if PROMESA worked the way it was supposed to, we would be able to help 3 million American citizens live a little bit better of a life. And so the opportunity to finally do something a little practical, not just to be an intellectual, but to do something practical, made it a very, very easy decision.
But back then, do you know anything about the complexity of our political problems, the economic issues, the whole, process? It was very complicated, not just economically, but politically. The fact, our relationship with the United States, all the political dynamics of Puerto Rico.
I thought I knew something about Puerto Rico and about the politics and about the relationship with the United States. But I quickly realized once I got on the board that I really didn't know very much, and that it was much, much more complicated than I ever imagined. The politics, as you alluded to, are just incredibly complicated, and I didn't have any sense of that at all.
At some point, have you regret to join the board or being part of this oversight entity?
I have never once for a second regretted being part of the board. There were times when it was difficult and when it was stressful, and there were times when I thought, maybe I should resign, maybe I've had enough of this, but I never regretted it. It really was, such a privilege. It was the biggest privilege of my professional career, so no regrets at all.
And I'm telling you this because at some point, and I still believe that the Puerto Ricans, they haven't understood the full complexity of what we have been through over these 10 years. And at this point, I believe we don't see the dimension of the problem and the whole process. What do you think about that?
I think you're right about that, and my answer to that is please read the book. When you read the book, you might not know what the answers are, but you will see some of the complexities and difficulties, and it is incredibly complicated. I mean, it's incredibly complicated under ordinary circumstances, but then when you have Hurricane Maria and you have Governor Rosselló being forced to resign and in the pandemic, that just made it even more complicated.
You were a regular board member from 2016, right? Until 2022. Then Jose Carrion left and you became the chairman of the board.
That's correct. I think it was 2020. So
okay.
I was a regular board member from the end of August 2016 to the beginning of October 2020. Okay. And then from October 2020 until the summer of 2024, I was the chair.
Okay, and what is the motivation to write a book about PROMESA and the Promised Land? What is the main objective of this publication?
Well, there are a couple. One reason that I wrote the book is because that's what I do. I write books and I write articles, and I knew from very early on that I was going to write a book about what was happening in Puerto Rico. But a second reason is this is the biggest governmental debt restructuring in American history and one of the most complicated debt crises in American history. And people need to know about it. I mean, I think it's important that people in Puerto Rico know about it. I also think that it's important that people on the mainland know about it. And then the other reason I wrote the book is Puerto Rico really is a case study for the rest of the country. Puerto Rico is not going to be the last American government to get into a crisis. We have governments on the mainland right now that are on the verge of crisis. Chicago and Illinois are the two biggest examples. And if their crisis gets worse, Congress is going to have exactly the same options that it had the same issues it had with Puerto Rico.
And you believe that the case of Puerto Rico will be a reference to do legislation to other cases like Chicago, Illinois, or other?
I absolutely think it is. I think that with Chicago, say, or with Illinois, or with another state, Congress is going to have the same choices. And I think what they're going to end up talking about the same things. They're going to end up talking about an oversight board, and they're going to end up talking about bankruptcy.
And this book will be a framework?
I'm hoping so. Yeah, I'm hoping that it will be a must-read for anybody whose government looks like it may be in crisis.
10 years after PROMESA was enacted, do you believe Congress really understand the whole problem of Puerto Rico? Because I know, the board have achieved some, goals and objectives, but I believe Congress, they don't get it, or I believe they are not engaged to go, to solve other issues, structural problems that we still have.
I think that's true. I think that Congress tends to have a short attention span, and so it will focus on Puerto Rico for a while, as it did after the governor said that Puerto Rico's debts were not payable in 2015. And then after Hurricane Maria, there was some focus on Puerto Rico. But at other times, Congress doesn't focus on Puerto Rico so much. So I do think that's an issue. I think it's going to be difficult for Congress to do its part in helping Puerto Rico move forward, unless there is a little bit more of a focus on what's going on. And it is very complicated.
Tell me about the title, The Promised Land, what it means.
So Promised Land means several different things. I'm very fond of the title. So when I think about Puerto Rico and when I think about the debt crisis, what comes to mind is promises made and promises broken. And so if you look back historically at Puerto Rico, there are a series of promises that were involved. When the United States first came to Puerto Rico in 1898, many Puerto Ricans thought that Puerto Rico was going to become a state, or was going to have an opportunity to become a state. In 1952, when the Constitution was adopted, many people thought that the United States had promised to change the relationship, and that had changed the relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S. And you could name lots of other promises made or not made and thought about. So there's a historical basis for the title Promised Land. Second reason, and there are three, is that PROMESA, the legislation that passed, began with a promise. It began with a promise that was made by Paul Ryan, who was the House Majority Leader. He needed votes to get a must-pass spending bill through Congress in the very end of 2015. He made a deal with Nancy Pelosi to give her some Democratic priorities in return for 100 Democratic votes. He wasn't able to get relief for Puerto Rico into that spending bill, but when he failed to get the relief into the spending bill, he said, I promise that within 3 months, there will be a responsible solution, and those were his words, responsible solution to the Puerto Rico crisis. And that's what led to Promised Land. Then the final reason it's called Promised Land is, of course, that promesa means promise in Spanish. And it was Congress's promise to Puerto Rico, and I believe that promise has mostly been fulfilled. It's not completely done, but a lot of that promise has been fulfilled.
So what are the lessons that you believe Puerto Rico have learned in the political, class and the business sector and the society itself? Well, I believe that we have learned to avoid another bankruptcy, or we still...
I think we don't know for sure whether those lessons have been. If you ask me what are the lessons that I think should be learned and that I hope people learn from reading this book, my answer would be don't ever let this happen again. It is, if you have a debt crisis like this, it is devastating to everyone, and everyone ends up suffering. So the main lesson is do whatever you can not to let this happen again. Has that lesson been learned? I'm not sure. I think the question is really going to be whether the legislature is fiscally responsible after the oversight board is gone. And I think it really is the obligation both of the people of Puerto Rico and of the business community really to put more pressure on lawmakers to be more responsible going forward.
And what is your vision of Puerto Rico after we end all this process? And another question, when do you believe the PROMESA will be repeal or the PROMESA will end in Puerto Rico?
So two very different questions. I guess they're kind of related. Yeah. The first, what is my vision? I mean, my vision is that there be a new era of fiscal responsibility.
You believe so?
Fiscal irresponsibility is what got Puerto Rico into this crisis. 16 straight years of budgets that weren't balanced. It was too easy to borrow money for Puerto Rico, and so the debt load got bigger and bigger. My hope is that because of this experience and because of some of the reforms that are being put in place, such as civil service reform that's being implemented, such as creating a stronger budget office at the Commonwealth and in the legislature so that they can assess how much legislation is going to cost. Those kinds of measures, I think, will make the finances a lot more transparent and will make it a little harder for lawmakers to be irresponsible in the future. But my vision is that they continue to be fiscally responsible and that the economy take off. The job of the board was never to pick what industries are going to be the future of Puerto Rico. But it's not hard to guess what some of them may be. I mean, there's a long history of pharmaceutical industry in Puerto Rico. America is now trying to onshore more of its industry and more of its supply chain. I mean, Puerto Rico has a history there. So I think if the economy can get on its feet, all these other things can develop from there.
So you believe the board is going to be here for at least 2 or 4 more years?
I thought you would ask that question more specifically. I don't know is the short answer. You know what the PROMESA rule is. There have to be 4 straight balanced budgets. I certainly hope that we don't celebrate a 20th anniversary of the board. That 10th anniversary is the last big anniversary. The board's not going to be gone next year. Probably not the year after, but I hope soon after that. I do think that the board can't be here forever. And I think ideally the board will finish the main things that are left, such as PREPA, which is an unresolved issue, obviously, and some of the other fiscal responsibility reforms. And hopefully 3 or 4 years. I don't know how many. Maybe it'll be 5, but not 10.
What are your big achievements during the time that you were a member of the board?
The biggest achievement, and not just because I'm a bankruptcy person, but the biggest achievement was the Commonwealth restructuring. That was, as I've
2022, right?
It's 2022.
March.
It went into effect in March.
Yes.
Biggest governmental restructuring in American history, and it really was a brilliant restructuring. It was win-win for everybody. The creditors did well in the restructuring. Puerto Rico was protected. The amount of debt Puerto Rico has going forward is much, much lower than it was before. It really was an enormously successful restructuring. Also, I didn't mention the pension system. It really shored up the pension system. No other accomplishment really rises to that level. There are lots of things that we did that I'm proud of, but the big achievement was the Commonwealth restructuring.
And finally, do you have any recommendations for Puerto Rico, the stakeholders, the politicians, the private sectors, and the university community about the future? Do you have any advice for us?
My dream is just that there be pressure both from the people of Puerto Rico and from the business community on lawmakers in Puerto Rico to be fiscally responsible. And it can be done. There's a lot of populism in Puerto Rican politics, and I have a little bit of populist in myself, so I'm somewhat sympathetic to it. But there shouldn't be populism with irresponsibility, in my view. And it can be done. I mean, a good example of a place that really changed in that regard is Jamaica. Jamaica is very different from Puerto Rico. It's a country, it has a different kind of economy. But the people of Jamaica decided that they had had enough. And there was pressure from every community to stop borrowing beyond what they could repay, to be fiscally responsible, to truly balance the budgets. And that's my dream for Puerto Rico.
And finally, where can people get the book?
So very soon you'll be able to get the book anywhere. As of right now, the fastest way to get it is to order it from the publisher, Paul Dry. They will send it out immediately. So if you order it from them, you get it right away. If you order it from Amazon, it'll come out closer to the publication date, which is August 25. So right now, order it from the publisher. August 25, you can order it from Amazon or anywhere else where books are sold.
And finally, once you retire, do you plan to come to Puerto Rico as a retiree, or to do some, any... As a professor or as a...
That's really what I'm thinking. I mean, Puerto Rico is now in my blood system. I have dedicated 10 years of my life to these issues in Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico. I love coming to Puerto Rico. I love the people of Puerto Rico. I expect to continue coming. I would like to teach at one or more of the law schools, would be the most natural thing for me to do, and I'll be happy to serve in other ways. Anywhere where someone thinks I can be useful, call me and I'll come.
Thank you, David,
You're
for your service.
Welcome.
Thank you, and for being here with our viewers. Bueno, ya escucharon a David Skeel. Los exhorto a que lean este gran libro, porque aquí yo creo que hay muchas de las respuestas que todavía el país tiene que buscar sobre lo que pasó en esta crisis tan terrible fiscal y económica que el país ha atravesado, una quiebra dolorosa que ha afectado la vida de muchos puertorriqueños y que todavía estamos recuperándonos de ella. Así que mi llamado es a la clase política, al sector privado, a la sociedad, a que miremos las lecciones aprendidas de este proceso doloroso y vergonzoso que el país ha pasado por estos 10 años, y que el sector privado coge el liderato del desarrollo económico para que no volvamos a repetir una quiebra y el país pueda crecer y darle calidad de vida a todos los puertorriqueños. Así que nuevamente gracias, David, por estar aquí. Thank you for being with our viewers tonight, and hope to see you soon.
I hope to see you as well. Thanks so much for talking with me.
Será hasta la próxima. Un fuerte abrazo.